is an unprecedented disaster in the city's history, very challenging for everybody. And this review is really for us as the city emergency organization. We're reflecting on how we did internally, and we've been having a lot of meetings this week internally, but we also need to know how did it look from the outside, especially with messaging, mostly messaging because we're not a response agency, but our biggest job in an emergency is collecting information and getting it out to people. And it's very difficult, and we know it is by no means perfect. We always try to do our best, but we really want to know in in these cases, how did our response look to the outside? Because that will help inform us going forward as we look at our training, response procedures, and future communication. So to help us with this, it's always wise to bring in an outside firm who has no stake in the game, right? Who can be objective. So we have contracted with the company Witt O'Brien, who has a lot of experience doing this. And so they will be leading this after action review, and I'm going to hand it over to them and let them introduce themselves.
I'm with a company called Witt O'Brien's. We are a national disaster management firm, and we provide support to a variety of jurisdictions across the country before disasters, during disasters, after disasters. And one of those things that we do is come after an incident and do a post-incident analysis and look at things in terms of the agency's capabilities to respond to events, what went well, what didn't go so well, and functionally, where can some improvements be made. And in this case, the city has taken a very genuine approach to looking at where things are at and what can move forward. So just give you some snapshot. My background is I spent 30 years in local government. I started in the fire service and then went into emergency management, homeland security. Most recently was in Sacramento as their emergency manager, and with me is Vince Hobbs, who spent a career in the fire service and ended up as a part of his fire service career in the Bay Area, having been an emergency manager for a jurisdiction. And Tammy Knox is with us, who has national experience in disaster management. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to look at just a couple things. I'm going to kind of just explain this process so you have an idea as to what we're doing as part of that after action process. And then we're going to get into an interactive point where you all are going to have an opportunity to tell us what you experience. And that's going to be the important part of this of tonight, is hearing from your perspective the questions that we have, and you know, if you have additional comments, we'll be happy to take those as well. And we're going to try to do it in a somewhat structured environment, but please feel free to provide input. When you do speak, we ask that you do. We have a couple of microphones set up on the side here because we do have individuals that are also remote and they're on Zoom. And so that'll be able to give them an opportunity to hear what the questions are and be engaged from the remote setting. And then we'll give them also, the individuals that are on Zoom, that opportunity to weigh in. And so if we can go to the next slide, please. So in terms of the after action process, this is the opportunity that you all have to weigh in on your experience. How did the city, how were they able to respond? How were they able to manage the incident and maintain services and the variety of things that the city does during this really chaotic event? Why do this? You know, it's always healthy. This is a best practice in emergency management. This is a best practice in any kind of incident management, is to look back at how did that incident go? Every incident's different. There's always going to be different kinds of triggers. There's going to be different kinds of environments that cause different outcomes. And then how was that organization able to withstand those situations and respond to those situations effectively and efficiently? And so, you know, this is right here, just it's something that just naturally should happen as a part of the response cycle, but this is really the important parts. You know, we want to make sure that we highlight those things that went well so that we encourage those behaviors in future events. And at the same time, We want to look at those areas that we were challenged in so that we can make improvements to policies or procedures or processes or whatever those things are to make those improvements happen so that the next event will work out better. Um, there's a direct value to you as the community, obviously, because the city's that first line of defense in terms, well, in addition to you as residents, in terms of response actions towards natural disasters such as the fires. And so as we're able to enhance processes, we're able to find ways to improve methodologies and maintain positive outcomes, that's going to have a direct impact to you as residents. Um, and successes. And this is, oftentimes when we do after action reviews, the tendency is to look at the difficulties or look at those challenge points. Um, when it's not just trying to capture the successes to celebrate and make a big deal over the good things that were done. That's important, but again, it's also to make sure that those behaviors, that those processes are maintained and that they continue through the next event. You're going to see that I'm going to ask you a series of questions. We're going to start out with the positives. We're going to go into the challenges, and then we're going to get into some functional areas. And the functional areas, if they may have been covered in the pluses and minuses, and if not, that'll be just kind of helpful to you all to really, fine tune the question development. But again, as we go through this, if there's additional areas that I'm not covering on, please feel free to give those our way. Okay, so let's just start with the good stuff. So where did you see in terms of the city's response to both the Franklin and or the Palisades fire in terms of the response? What were some of the positives? What were some of the highlights that you want to see the city maintain in terms of that approach to a response?
Job. Um, I've been here since 1993, live in Big Rock, house almost burned in 93. Response and how fast they stopped it and got it under control and how many homes they saved actually gave me a false sense of security. Or do you want me to just stay positive right now?
Feel free.
Okay. How many lives and homes were saved during Franklin? And a lot of us who've been here a long time looked at that and thought, oh my God, they finally have this together, right? We're not going to have what happened in 93 in Big Rock, where all the firemen were down on PCH and nobody came up to save our homes. And back then we lost a lot of homes, but it came from the top, not from the bottom. So on January 7th, 1 o'clock, I actually saw the fire go up. I was in the Palisades on Sunset and saw the fire at 10:30 in the morning. Watched it till I knew they were going to shut PCH down. I came home. 1 o'clock, a police officer came and knocked on my door and says, you need to evacuate. Well, at that point, it was still in the Palisades. And I'm thinking, there's no way these firemen are going to let the fire get from the Palisades to Big Rock. We've got Tuna, we have Topanga, and I've had this false sense of security. I did pack up my car. We have fire hoses. And I thought, oh, we will be notified again if it gets close. And we were driving down PCH and going up to Wade's property. Wade's here, Wade. It's the first time I met Wade. And we're not stupid. So we go home. We think we're fine. No more notice, nothing on watch duty, nothing from the city, nothing on the news. Everything was Palisades, Palisades, Palisades. I had an elderly woman at my house that night who's 90 years old and her two sons. And we then leave again and end up on Wade's driveway. And my husband's like, oh my God, the fires in Big Rock. We had no idea. Come back. I have to wait for her and her sons to leave. I leave. I get lost in the fire. I can't see where I'm going. The fire is now up Big Rock. It's now in our Mesa area. I get surrounded by flames and fire. I end up by accident on Wade's driveway, not intentionally, but when I turned onto Big Rock, I was blinded by the smoke and fire. I got stuck up there for 40 minutes on a boulder. Nobody would come. I was praying to God that I would die from smoke. The firemen wouldn't come. They said it was too dangerous. Sheriff's Department doesn't have GPS. They can't find me. Harrison Knoll with the Sheriff's Department was amazing. He spent 10 minutes with me on the phone. He goes, I can't find you. I don't know where you're at. He goes, you have to call 911 again. I go, 911 transferred me to you. After that, I just started honking my horn. I thought, nobody's coming to rescue me. And by the miracle of God, a neighbor who'd been at my house heard my horn. And my husband found a fireman named Malcolm Dix who risked his life to come save mine. And if it hadn't been for him, I would not be here today testifying. So I think there's a lot of people to blame on this. I don't think it's just the fire department. I think it's communication. It's like how from the Palisades at 1 o'clock, they knew it was coming into Malibu and were not able to stage and stop it there at Topanga or Tuna. And it was coming from PCH. It wasn't coming up above. It was coming across, and they could have easily staged it. And I know we had high winds, and I know at that point it was tough to fly helicopters, but they could have staged it. And they also told the fire brigade not to come up to Big Rock. And that has to be acknowledged as well. There is a reason, there's no reason why they should not have let them come. They could have saved Joe Drummond's house. They could have saved a lot of homes, but they weren't allowed to come. And anyways, thank you for hearing me. And I just want to also say the city that thank you for coverage 6. I love them. I feel so much safer in our neighborhood with them patrolling. So thank you for getting that done.
Well, thank you.
Just a couple of thoughts. This is specifically a question about the examples of how the city responded to the fires. I think the most significant one that I saw was that our city government, which was not very agile in functioning in exile during Woolsey, learned to operate when it's not at City Hall. So that I thought was pretty seamless. Especially during Franklin, they had to leave the building. The building was surrounded by fires. We really didn't notice any diminished function of City Hall. I think that was partly they learned to do it during COVID. Woolsey was the first major fire that impacted the city to any significant degree in over in a couple of decades. So this time I felt like, okay, between Franklin and Palisades, the city has learned when City Hall is not available, the departments continue to function, the city government continues to function, city council is there, people communicate. A lot of that is because we have better communication tools now. So that is for me the number one thing. And then they immediately began having public hearings and town halls and so forth after the fact. So all of that, I think we were all grateful for.
Okay, thank you. And do we have somebody on Zoom?
I don't know.
Okay, sounds good. So the question is, would be about possibilities for fee waivers for residents trying to build with limited funds from California Fair Settlement only. As of right now, the question is in regards to fee waivers.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I'm able to answer that.
Say that, unfortunately, we can't really comment on that. And while it's definitely a question that's at top of mind, the emphasis for this meeting here is more looking back at the response, and not what's happening with recovery right now, even though that's 100% valid and we understand that's top of mind right now.
Yeah.
But thank you.
Tori does have her hand raised. Tori, would you like to speak?
I'm unmuted. My name is Victoria Franklin Dillon. My address was 22261 Pacific Coast Highway, above Tremonto's Pizza, with access at what is now Carbon Beach Terrace. I was the first house that did not burn in the Franklin fire, and I was the last house to burn in the Palisades fire after 70 years, with a swimming pool full of water and a gas pump with 20 gallons of gas ready to go. My gardener, who was spending the night in the house, willing to give his life for our family, um, was escorted off the property by someone from the fire department somewhere around 2 in the morning. I got out with my life at 10:30 at night with an emergency signal that came in on my cell phone. I was asleep in a rocking chair in the dining room. I had to use a small portable chainsaw to cut branches that had blown down off my eucalyptus trees in the driveway with my garden man's helper. And he was willing to risk his life. The day after the fire, a friend's child, who stayed to save his home in Sarah, photographed our place smoldering, and the fact that there were still fire trucks down on the street, lightly sprinkling the two Ellison houses that were burning down. And no one came up to our house to fight the fire whatsoever. We're about 1,000 yards off PCH with a PCH address. The house has been there 70 years. Um, and we had our 20-year wraparound policy canceled about a year ago. So we only had California Fair Plan. And I am, as far as the effort with the Rebuild Center and the people that are there, Lauren and Yolanda and the firemen that are talking to us, at this point it is not looking like we can meet the requirements for all the width of driveway and access, and they want us to bring a hydrant all the way up from the highway to the property ourselves, which is possibly as much money as the fair plan has given us to rebuild the entire house. So that is why I'm asking about the fee waivers, and that there are many retired people. I am a retired high school teacher and artist. I've been working on a big body of work up at the house, much of which was burned up. And I'm 74 years old, and I'm really grateful to be part of this meeting tonight and to say that I only wish the firemen had come up the driveway. Other fire trucks have come up the driveway and have saved our home in the past, as have our family members with the pool. My ex brother in law was an LA County lifeguard, and he personally saved our house once. So, we have fought many, many fires, and the house was built in 55, and losing it now at this fire was just stunning. I know how fast those winds were. Those winds and the way it can come down from Saddle Peak were mind-blowing to me, and I'm grateful to God that I got out that night personally. So I'm right there with the grateful to be alive group. And if we had the fee waivers, we'd have a small shot at rebuilding. Thank you very much for listening.
I encourage you to participate in the public process and the council process. Yes, sir.
Dietrich, I live up Rambla Pacifico. At 10:30 on the 7th, I was in Santa Monica, got a call from someone who worked for us for a long time. Do you know about the fire? Well, I don't. But I turn around, so she says it's in the Palisades, and behind me, I'm standing in front of St. John's, and wow, there's a lot of smoke. So my wife and I go get through the roadblocks, get up to our house, and I look, and the fire is way, way in the Palisades. And the wind wasn't that strong as we're driving up the coast highway. Okay. So we're at our house, but I don't like the wind direction. So we start loading the cars, which from experience takes us 5 hours. But the best thing, I'll come back to this, but the best thing was that after the Woolsey fire, Susan and her team in public safety got fire liaison officers to inspect homes. And a number of us took the National Fire Protection Association home hardening courses. That saved about 75% of the homes that people had done what they were supposed to do, created defensible spaces, hardened their home on the advice of our fire liaisons. That is probably the most impressive thing. But on January 7th, only 10% of homes in Malibu had done that hardening and taken that advice. So here we are on the 7th. We get home, it's daylight. The wind's 20. It's not strong. From the patio, watching it come the other direction, coming from the west. And about 3 o'clock, I could tell there was a shift in the wind. And the fire basically stopped. And yeah, there were helicopters. And the next morning, they just hammered it. $500,000. So there was a way in or out on Rambla so that the fire department would come. In 93, a fire engine burned there. Fire department says, we're not going in because there's only one way or in or out. So Big Rock, Sunset Mesa, I don't know about that, may or may not. But Carbon Mesa, no fire strike forces at all. Where are they? Well, some were down on the coast highway, and a neighbor who was down there with them told me that they said, well, there's houses burning. You need to do something. We're waiting for orders. This is the exact same thing we heard during Woolsey. There were strike teams poised, ready to go, but they didn't have orders. Down there, as it was said in Woolsey, you guys are on your own. And that's what it comes down to. We did not have the fire protection we needed. Now, that's outside the city's purview. I get that. So what did the city do well? Well, they did the fire liaisons. That was great. They were working with, though it was kind of independent, the fire brigades. There were fire brigades up in my neighborhood. I don't know if they made it to Big Rock. It sounds like they didn't. They were prevented. what is the fire department doing preventing anybody from fighting fires? Something really wrong there. So the city then, as Wade said, they kept functioning, which they didn't in Woolsey. They had, I can't remember, a couple weeks after, they had a big meeting that we attended at the high school. But they listened to Patty, they listened to others. Unfortunately, I think at that point, they should have had another meeting saying what the council was gonna do. And they didn't do it. They started having workshops. Fine. Did they listen to what was being said by the technical professionals? No, I don't think they did. And now we're in a situation where people are facing the daunting task of rebuilding. Third, and it's a real stretch. And depending on what actions the city takes to make rebuilding easier or harder, people are going to decide whether to rebuild or not. And a lot of them, and you're seeing it in the Palisades, how many lots are for sale? We're going to lose Malibu unless we can think outside of the box and the council can take strong action to help in any way possible to rebuild. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Lorick. I was born and raised in Malibu. My family's been here since 1966, so I've seen all the fires. I used to live in Big Rock until the house burned down. And the one thing that I would have to say the city did well, okay, was during the Franklin fire. He came and knocked on my door at like 2 in the morning, and yeah, I didn't. So, and then we went outside and the wind was blowing and we saw the helicopters making drops in the middle of the night when the wind was blowing. My phone, I was getting alerts on my cell phone. I was getting alerts on my home phone. So, I didn't go to work that day because I'd been up all night with the alerts. It was constant. So fast forward to January 7th, I actually had gone to work. My kids were at home because they had closed the school because of the extreme winds. I couldn't get to work because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were there. That was the only good thing they've ever done, was make me go back home. And I was at the 76 station at Sunset and PCH, 10:30 in the morning, and I got something from Watch Duty about the Hollywood Hills. And I was like, well, why do I smell smoke here? And then I realized, then I got another one saying there was a fire up in the Highlands. Contacted my sister, who's immunocompromised, lives at the bottom of the Highlands, and said, you better get your medicine. I don't know what's going on. Long story short, one sister lost her house in the Palisades. My niece lost her house in the Palisades. My other sister's house has severe smoke damage. I lost my home. I went home and I'm like, okay, it's in the Palisades. No worries. They're not going to let it get past the Getty. We've got Topanga. There's just not a chance. It wasn't even a consideration. Did work from home around 1:00. We're in the backyard and we're watching the fire dropping planes go into the ocean, get the water. There's not a leaf blowing, nothing is blowing. So this idea that there's these 100-mile-an-hour winds or whatever that cause this is just a false narrative that's being perpetrated. Later in the evening, there was. So I called the city of Malibu and I said, why am I getting this alert on Watch Duty that we're in an evacuation zone? The city says, we don't know what you're talking about. We're not getting any alerts. There's no issue. This is from the city of Malibu. So then around 1:30, I saw a police car go up Big Rock. And I'm like, okay, I better call the city again. And they said, same story. Nothing to worry about. We're not getting any indication there's any issue. I'm like, all right. But during the Franklin fire, the power was out for 3 days. I've got 9-year-old triplets. I was not inclined to stay home with the power out for 3 days or more with 9-year-old triplets. So I left. my husband stayed because he stayed during the Franklin fire. And around still, I didn't leave because I was notified by the sheriff. I didn't leave because the city notified me on my cell phone or my home phone. I left because I thought, I don't want to be bothered with the power going out because it goes out all the time in Malibu. So, and I wasn't really even focusing. I wasn't even watching the news in the hotel. I had to go to a hotel because I usually evacuate to my sister's house in the Palisades, and that wasn't an option. So I finally get a hold of my husband around 8 o'clock at night, and he says, "You need to call 911. The house is burned down. Penny died, and my car is on fire." And I'm like, maybe I use the whole term. And he's like, "No." So I call 911. The sheriff's department patches me in or patches into the fire department. And they're like, "There's nothing we can do." And I said, "He's going to die." And they said, "Sorry, there's nothing we can do. We're not going up to Big Rock." And so I call him back and I said, they're not coming for you. They're not coming for you. And he's like, "What do you mean they're not coming?" He's like, "I'm at the bottom of Big Rock. I'm at the first bend." And I said, "They're not coming for you." And he's like, "I'm going to die." And I said to him, and now this is something that I'm sure people really enjoy hearing. I say to him, "Do you want to talk to the kids and say goodbye?" "No, I can't do that." And I said, "Okay." So thankfully, I had a friend who had been evacuated from the Franklin fire. And her husband contacted a friend who lives between Big Rock and Las Flores, who was still in the area. And he tried to go up. They finally got a sheriff's car to go up and get him. And then they dumped him. So they went to Duke's. And then I guess Duke's was going to be evacuated. Then they dumped him at the Civic Center in Malibu when he needed oxygen. He was compromised. He needed help. And he called me and he's like, I said, "They're not sending you an ambulance?" He's like, No, I'm here by myself. No one is. I said, "Okay." So I left my kids at 10 o'clock at night, came over Cane and Doom. And as I'm coming down, I'm like, I don't even know if I'm going to make it to the Civic Center to get him because I can see the flames cresting the hills. It must have been in Carbon at that time. And he's sitting there shivering in the corner over Malibu Canyon, which I didn't want to do because it was windy by that time and there was like a lot of dust and it was dangerous. But that was the quickest way for me to get him to the hospital. And he ended up in the hospital. The whatever chemicals from smoke inhalation were extremely high. He spent days in the hospital. He still has not recovered. His oxygen levels, he was an athlete when he was in college or whatever, but he can't, his oxygen levels are, they dip below 90 all the time. He's exhausted. It's totally impacted our lives. And I feel that I take issue with. One, and you ask like, what could have been done differently? In the 93 fires, the fire engines left Big Rock because the water ran out. But there were people up there, and the firemen came back, and they saved people. And I feel that how the whole fire was managed, I feel like the city of Malibu should probably sue the city of Los Angeles because of their incompetence, because there was no firemen anywhere. There wasn't enough because of the sheer level of incompetence. And when I drove on PCH and I saw where the fire burned, and I'm like, why didn't they station fire engines at Topanga? Because it came from below. It doesn't take a genius to figure out how to do that. And then on top of that, Bel Air a couple weeks later, there's a fire in Bel Air because I'm living someplace else, and and because the resources were already here, they knocked that fire out. They knocked the fire out at Castaic because there were resources. I don't understand why in an area where there's so many fires that we don't have the appropriate resources. Point Magoo is right up the coast. Why aren't the fire dropping helicopters and planes stationed there? People talk about climate change, and this is why we have these big fires, yada, yada, yada. Well, then do something about it. So there's a combination of things. What needs to be done? MRCA needs to be accountable. They're terrorists. They basically hold everyone hostage and sue everybody and let all this brush run wild. And then let's use some common sense. Have some fire dropping helicopters. Why weren't the fire engines, ready to go? It are supposed to be, home because it's a high winds, high fire, and there was not enough fire engines. It's ridiculous. It just makes no sense to me. It's basic logic that has just gone out the window. So irritated now that I'm underinsured. My kids ask me, when are we going to go home? They're crying. My daughter lost her dog. Their dad, he finally went to, my daughter said, "It's the big show, Dad. Can you come and see?" Because he hasn't wanted to do anything.
Yeah.
So it's a mess.
Yeah, I do understand. It's horrific to have gone through that. I'm hopeful that on the fire agencies, they're likely doing the same kinds of reviews. Our review, of course, is limited to, the city of Malibu, and that's our purview. Any more on Zoom? Or actually, let's just go over here. Yes, sir.
First of all, is this on?
Yes.
Great. My name's Norm Haney, and I think the city has done an incredible job. I couldn't think of one thing that they did incorrectly. Unfortunately, the county is responsible for many, many homes being burned for a whole lot of reasons. First of all, you don't think about wildfire when the wildfire breaks out. You think about it years in advance, and you start clearing areas so the fire can't get to your homes. Fire breaks. The Los Angeles County Fire Department used to do that, but now the environmental groups have said no. So as a response, have gotten to these people's homes. Fire breaks should go on all the time. The fire department should have access roads getting to those fire breaks so they can stop the fire before it gets over the top of the hill. It's that simple. And there's simply no excuse for not doing it. The Los Angeles County should be sued. I know for a fact that there is a check valve in Topanga Canyon, about 600 yards north of PCH. That check valve has not been fixed for at least 10 years that I know of. There's a 20-inch water main that goes up to 2 tanks high up on Topanga Ridge that have 2 million gallons of water. But because they couldn't open the check valve, that water was not available to go into the 30-inch main in PCH and provide the hydrants with water. Now, no one apparently has the guts to sue the county, but the county should be sued because they did not maintain their facilities. Instead, they tried to get the private sector to fix it for them. And as a consequence, it didn't get fixed. And as a consequence, homes burned to the ground. So you don't fight a fire when it breaks out. You fight it years in advance by taking the proper steps. And everyone
have 15,000 gallons water tank and a draft hydrant approved by the fire department. Not that they'll come, because they probably won't. But you should have the ability to fight the fire and save your own home, because the county fire department is likely not going to be there ever. In the Woolsey fire, saying, help save my house, will you come up? We don't have orders. At Zuma Beach, and they wouldn't come up because they didn't have orders. Now, that is a total, complete failure on the part of Los Angeles County Fire Department and the Los Angeles County Department of Public Works and the Water Department. Malibu, it's very hard for Malibu to be able to do things on their own, especially when it comes to fire breaks. The mountains are not within their jurisdiction.
Right.
But the city did everything right. As much as a city could do. No. The Los Angeles County Department of Waterworks, no. People need to realize they're going to have to take care of their own water supply and have firefighting ability there. And also have air tanks so that if they overwhelmed by the smoke, they can save their lives. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody on Zoom?
We do not have any raised hands on Zoom.
Right over here. Yes, sir.
Spent the night in Big Rock defending my home until it burned the next morning. I understand that the session right now is about what can the city specifically do. Of course, we know a lot of people, including the fire department. It's not about that today. It's about the alert system. I got an alert, and memories are a little bit cloudy right now, but I did get an alert about high winds. That was very dramatic. I should stay away from the windows. And I was like, geez, that's a little bit overly dramatic. Joked about it with my wife. Little did I know that 2 days later my house would be gone. So at some level, there was an awareness that it was a dangerous situation. Where it ended. Towards the fire department in those situations, communicate, are you guys aware? What are you guys doing? Trying to manage upwards, basically, in that direction. What alerts I received during the day. I remember that I felt informed. I can't remember through which sources. It was TV, smoke signals, literally, because when I looked out of my window, there was a pretty close and moving closer. And my wife and my neighbor were looking at me, were like, are we going to evacuate? Are we not? And about 4 o'clock, I said, yeah, you guys get out of here. That needs to happen now. Could have been anticipated that the fire department would not access Big Rock in a situation like this.
Right.
If so, because people died. Like that happens again, people will die again. Reasons the fire department didn't enter was that there's only one access and egress road to Big Rock. Originated And who's going to create that? Who's in whose hands is that? I believe the city has an influence. And road, there's a fire road at the top of Big Rock, which I don't know why was not usable. Maybe because of the MRCA. I don't know. And I don't know if they are even allowed to forbid access to that road in a fire situation, but technically there is a road, for whatever reason, not usable. And how a community to live in a situation where people will die happens again. Or hands full with rebuilding to initiate anything, but to take the initiative and to remedy this dangerous situation, this life-threatening situation. That I believe the city can do, and I expect the city to do. And the last thing I want to mention is the brush clearance. There are entities that are not city, that are not clearing brush, that are sabotaging efforts to clear brush. There are decisions from the fire department to do things like controlled burns, and they are stopped by those entities. And that is a danger for the city. So the city needs to take the initiative to throw whatever funds are necessary, whatever lawsuits are necessary.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Joe Drummond. I lost my house in Big Rock. We had over 700 houses burned down, so that's at least 700 individuals, possibly 1,400 kids, or 2,000 kids and families. So, but yet you only have maybe barely 20 people here because they've given up. They've given up on the city. You guys have done a couple of things after Franklin. Franklin was a success because the fire department was working with the community brigade and they got that and the alerts were all working and everything was good with that fire. But for some reason, Palisades was a SH show. Like it was terrible. We were actually in India at the time, my husband and I, he's on the community brigade. And it was the middle of the night, but we were texting with everybody in Big Rock and he was texting with his community brigade and he was hearing the conditions were crazy. But the thing the city did do right is give money to the community brigade. I think they had 50 people and now they have applications for 500. For 50 people, they need $1 million to run. So for 500, they probably need at least $10 million a year to run. So if we can somehow get funding for our community brigades, they're the only one. They came into Big Rock hours before evacuating people, telling people when the city, we didn't get any warnings from the city, but the community brigade was there and they were evacuating and we were actually talking to them from our Ring camera and they were securing our house. They threw everything in the pool and they did their best. I mean, our house was hardened, but it was a strange circumstance that caused our house to burn down. So anyway, if we can get more funding for the community brigades, and then if we can pressure the county to keep that county road above our neighborhood in Big Rock clear, because then the community brigade and the fire department can be there to take a stand against the fire when it comes next time. And we need water tanks up there. I have a list of what we can, I'm sure we're going to have a question of what we can do to improve. Oh, no. Oh, we are.
Yeah,
we're here. Okay.
overlapping
I've
both.
got a list. So let me, if you don't mind, I can start that. Okay. So the city should, I had questioned our Big Rock board as well, because we have a homeowners association and we have some funds, but the city should also have funds to hire firefighters if the county is not going to be around, or fund the community brigade at least 50% so that we can send them to a neighborhood that is at risk. So they are deployed to defend our homes, because I know people in the Palisades who called a firefighter, a private firefighting team came and they protected their homes. So we should have something like that for the city, because we're a small city and it's only a few neighborhoods that get affected every time. But if we had private firefighters, then that would be a more reliable than waiting for the county. If there's multiple fires in the counties in Palisades and there's no water, that's a whole problem. So this work for the Franklin as a community brigade was on hand and ready and actively fighting fires, but not for Palisades, as resources were thin and the fire much bigger and affected more residential areas. Had there been Check deployed along the ridgeline at Tuna Canyon, or the fire motorways maintained so that the department and brigade could take a stand there, the fire would have never spread to the beach and Big Rock and beyond. The city also needs to launch its fire prevention beautification grant program. It's been on the back burner of the Public Works Commission or the Public Works Department for 2 years now, and that's to allow easements and rights of way owned by the city to be landscaped for wildfire safety and beautification, but more for resilience. So it should also launch a matching grant program for residents to apply to remove hazardous trees on their property. So this is an easier ask. And the city can also engage a contract with a Check firefighting pilot to spray the most at-risk fire spread areas before a huge red flag event like what was predicted for January 7th. Sorry. We received 0 emergency alerts from the city Palisades fire, so there was nothing to understand or timely about them. But I personally prefer text alerts, but received none about the Palisades fire, but several about the Franklin fire. So if we received an alert, period, would be an improvement. My son evacuated the house. He was there around 4 or 4:30 because I think he got a watch duty alert. And we didn't get any information on road closures, et cetera, any alert, but we need this. What happened to the alert FM system that every Malibu resident is supposed to have to be notified for an emergency? We also need city involvement to get MRCA in the county to keep their fire motorways clear of brush and our neighborhoods protected with a proper defensible space, including getting live oaks planted on our ridge lines, et cetera. We need goats deployed ASAP to the at-risk areas in Malibu with overgrown and non-native vegetation flourishing. We need a plan to have water tanks in all communities and potable water separated to the hydrants so water is available for firefighting. And we also need our like-for-like plus or minus 10% rebuilds fast tracks in a separate category from new construction so we can be rebuilt quickly and safely as per our governor's orders. So far, there's 85 permits issued in Palisades, and they're building, and that's like 20% of the houses burned down, and we haven't had one. So we need those. Thank you.
Thank you.
We do have 2 raised hands on Zoom. Colin Drummond, you are first.
Thank you. You hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, so Colin Drummond, that was my wife, Jo, just speaking. As she mentioned, we lost our house in the Big Rock fire. We were in India. And yeah, I'm on the community brigade. I had two specific suggestions, broad suggestions for the city. One is home hardening is the number one best defense we have. The science all proves it. I think, and the city's been doing a lot to do home ignition zone assessments for free, which is great. I think the big problem we have with home hardening right now is it's currently optional for people to do. There's, I think, legislation at some point in the process to make it mandatory. I would strongly suggest to the city to find a way to make it mandatory for City of Malibu residents, just because there's some people who, even with a big fire, don't necessarily pay attention to that stuff, or if they do, it's a short period of time. But if it's required, which includes zone 0, having nothing within 5 feet of your house that's flammable, that with every house we add hardened, it increases the safety of all the neighbors around it. In Big Rock, we lost 170 homes, so we're going to be able to have hardened homes with higher levels of code in place, which is great. But we got a lot of vulnerable parts of Malibu that have not burned, and we need for them to be safe. So I would ask the city to look for a way to make this a rule. The second thing is, as a community brigade member, one of the nice things about it is because we are part of the chain of command, we hear about situations first more quickly than a lot of others before the information gets out, and we're trained in evacuation, putting out spot fires after the event, and we tried to do a lot of communicating as well in the fires. So the second request, which I would echo from Joe, is for the city to heavily invest in the community brigade, because unfortunately we never know who's going to be able to show up to take care of our community. And if we have people embedded, it'll make a big difference. People that know their neighbors, that know their streets, and so on. And yeah, it's an amazing program, and we are growing it. We definitely need money. It's not a government entity. We would ask for the city to fund the brigade again for that. Those are my two big suggestions.
Roxanne Franklin White. And my family's been out in Malibu since 1951. My parents built the house that burnt 1956. We've, as the woman before me, have been through 15 fires, and this is the first time that we have burnt. From everyone I've talked to in the community, so many of us got our wraparound policies canceled within the last year. They had never done on-site visits. I've had their insurance for 35 years. Never did on-site. They would come out and find any little thing. Then they would do it right before you were going to renew. So even when you fix the problem, when you went to them and said, well, we'd like to have the policy reinstated, they said, oh, we can't reinstate, but we can issue a new policy. When the new policy came, it excluded wildfires. Unbelievable. I mean, that's why we all have it here in Malibu. Anyways, so then we're all left with California Fair Plan, and we think, well, at least we have fire. My agent, who used to be my Allstate agent, for some reason, when he was selling California Fair Plan, now that Allstate's out of out of California, he went to another insurance company, Golden Coast State or something, I don't know. But they sell California Fair Plan, and he didn't really advise us, that things were too low and that we should think about this and we should think about that, which, I almost feel like I wonder if that's what they tell them to do, like not give advice. And then the other thing is that they're using $300 a square feet of your home for rebuilding your home. Really? I mean, if you aren't in construction, you don't necessarily know that it's so completely unrealistic. But we've talked to people now, contractors, and they're saying that should have been, $575 to $1,000 a square feet in this community with the quality of things that are in houses. So that's something that we're all struggling with. And one of the things that I sort of can't believe that the city has not made a final decision on, almost coming up, 6.5 months into this thing,
Right.
of whether you're going to help us with the cost of permits. Permits add up to like $50,000 in this city. And that's a lot of money when we were all underinsured. Not in addition, all of these things, which if you've never had to do this before, you have no idea when when I covered myself for, upgrade of code, I thought it was the code, for building the house. No. Septic tanks, $180,000, not even to install them and take out the old one. Water lines. In our particular case, we live on a hill, and they're having 20 years ago, they took our meter down and put it on PCH. The water department did. So now what are we asked to do? Bring a pressurized line all the way up and have a hydrant within 750 feet from the house. I mean, another $2,000 to do that. It just goes on and on that you had no idea. And the insurance money is not there. And we aren't all billionaires. And they're treating us like the city's treating us like we wanted to rebuild our houses, and we, leveled it. Now you have to do everything that, people who come in and want to remodel their house and build a new house do. And that's just not the case. I mean, my septic tank was working just fine the day before the fire. My roads that they want me to, now have 20 feet were just considered fine the day before the fire. We've gone through so many fires, and fire engines could come up and they have, not as big a turnaround as they're asking us to do now. But again, I mean, how much these things cost, are just unbelievable. And you're not going to have half the community build it back unless we need help. Whether it could be that you go back up to Sacramento and, tell the governor that, he's got a grandfather in some of these things, just like they've been more creative about, letting them use their septic tank on the beach side until they build the sewer line. It's just incredible what they expect us to just be able to do with nothing. Okay, second of all, beyond all of that, I feel like access roads. I live just below Carbon Canyon. We were like the last house that burned. All the firemen were down on PCH. They were just standing around down on PCH. One fireman hiked my hill and got my gardener, who was with, I had left finally maybe an hour and a half before the house burned. And he was still at our house. And the fireman went in, woke him up and said, "You've got to get out now." And he said, "Can you give me 5 minutes?" And they said no. So he couldn't even get clothes, anything. And we had set him up, which we do every time the fire's here, with a pump that goes into the pool, and we can fight the fire ourselves. And, it was primed, it was checked to make sure that you could, turn it on and spray perfectly. Nobody used it. In fact, when we went up to the house for the first time, it was one of the things that had made it through the fire. and it's still turned on. So I don't know, I live above a lot of the houses that are owned by Larry Ellison. He had, his private brigade in. And I mean, those firemen who were on PCH were looking at how they were slurring his houses and not up at any of our houses that are burning. In fact, the way that we had a forensic guy come up and it looked, he's a friend, and it looked like the fire came down from Carbon Mesa and it was going through. And seriously, our house probably went because of an ember. An ember. And if anyone had been up there, you could easily have put it out. First of all, and then a lot of places like our house, they say, in many fires, our house has been saved by a crew coming up in a fire truck. Other times, people, you have to fight with them and say, you can make it up, you can turn around, but it's that whole thing about access. And, I've personally gone down to the city here and said, look, I own the lot up behind me. I know the Hamiltons whose house burned at the top of Carbon Mesa. They've wanted an access through PCH. And you could rebuild the road in partnership, with, and they say, well, we've got an access, and it's, it's one lane through the, back way of three people's homes, that if you aren't somebody who knows the area, they would not know that that is a second access to Carbon. And, I've gone down there and nobody wants to listen. That's one. So the other one that kills me is that Carbon Mesa, I read the big article in the paper, just like I'm sure everyone else did, how all those people are just out of luck because they don't have the water flow that they're requiring us to have to rebuild our homes. And they're out of luck because the whole area does not have the water flow, because the city put a plan that they had done everything, the environmental report, the costing out, everything that they had to do. And it was put in a drawer or a closet and didn't see the light of day. I was told that it was the city manager, Sheila. Anyways, the point is that was not upgraded. It should have been a priority to upgrade. What do they think? Fire's never going to come back to Carbon Mesa? And, it was an $8 or $9 million job that now probably will cost over $25 million or something, because everything has gone that way. And, I'm even connected to that because we can't afford to bring it up the way that we got water because they moved us down, and we can't spend $200,000 on installing and for the pressurized line. And the firemen would have a much harder time scaling the hill 750 feet from our house. So I woke up in the middle and said, well, wait a minute, Carbon Mesa's is a pressurized line that goes out. We gave them permission to actually put it on the edge of our property. And, so I've gone and applied for an alternative water source. And, they tell me the same thing. Well, until the fire department, decides with Public Works what they're going to accept as the flow, because they want people to be able to start rebuilding, and that it would take 3 or 4 years for them to do that big project in Carbon Mesa again. So I don't know if we're going to get it, but that is right next to my pool, which is right next to my house with 2 brick flat patios to protect our house. And it would be a hell of a lot easier for the firemen to take their hoses and not have to scale up a pretty steep hill. So these are all frustrations, you know. I mean, the hydrant is one thing that none of us knew. Again, where's the insurance line item? You know? And anyway, so those 2 things are very upsetting. They replaced the Carbon Mesa pressurized line about 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. And they asked us, you know, at that time, you know, can we just, we're going to leave the old pipe and we're going to put the new pipe, and, you know, we want it to go right by your pool equipment. Said, fine. Chose or green lighted for them to put in the exact same size of pipe. It's like if they're upgrading and redoing the whole system, well, they think there's not going to be growth and development in Malibu.
Yeah, these are
Yeah,
and
but they're all ultimately things that the city does with public works that need to be looked at.
And so I would say this. So you know, we're capturing this and we're collecting this. You know, our focus primarily is on the actual response to the fire.
So
I would recommend that, I mean, and I know it's frustrating, and I know, I mean, having served in government for a long time, I get the challenges and the frustrations. I would continue to engage in the public process, continue engaging in you know, letting those that make decisions aware of your situation.
yeah, I mean, it's just really tough for the residents.
And the insurance situation, that is,
Yeah.
it's miserable. And as a California resident, while not in the same situation you are, the insurance situation in California right now is very scary.
Yes, it is. And, you know, I don't know what we're going to do about it. That's the problem. And right now, even, you know, even with my wraparound, I realize that I have a notebook this big with every category that I have to have for rebuilding my house.
Right.
There are so many of those that have things that, you know, you can't do. Now, but when I get back to the city, I'll say that I do think the city could help the community by either partnering with the papers more to get out articles that tell you, you know, that make the impression on people, the urgency to learn about what you can do with your house and to learn about plants, to learn about really insuring your house for the amounts that these certain things should be insured for, and whether they have workshops or they have, I mean, right now you guys have a few workshops, but nobody's really telling us that it's like urgent.
Yeah.
And that when you're in this situation, if you ask anyone who's been through Woolsey or 1993 or, you know, 1990, I think it was 6 or 7, I mean, it just, you know, you guys have a lot of knowledge that hasn't got out there. So I really hope that the city gets more engaged and is more realistic.
Yeah, and definitely, you know, like a lot of what you brought forward, there's a lot of infrastructure issues. There's a lot of
And I don't understand it because, I mean, my sister and I inherited our house in 1977, and ever since I've been paying bills on that house, every single time we get a water bill, there's a fee for infrastructure upgrade. Now, where does that money go?
Well,
I don't see a whole lot of infrastructure.
Again, I encourage you to engage in the public process.
Okay. Thank you.
Zoom?
We do have 2 raised hands on Zoom. The first one to raise their hand is Jimmy's iPhone.
Jimmy's iPhone?
Jimmy's iPhone, if the iPhone can unmute, please.
Available?
Okay. We'll go ahead and go to the next one. It's going to be Georgia.
Hi, I appreciate your having this forum. And
Chris?
can you hear me?
Okay, perfect.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I just appreciate your having this forum. I think it's helpful, and I would like to see these measures continue until the things that we know work will work. And so I think this is a very important part of the process. So that's a good thing that's happening. I will say I am a very strong supporter for house hardening measures, and those were supported by the city and the community, and they do work. And so I think those things are very, very good. The fire brigades were supported. It's kind of nascent, but that's where we are. And so they were supported, and there were, some reasons that I'm sure will come out why the fire was so intense that they couldn't really come up the hill. But I don't know what that report is, but I would look forward to it. Also, although when the fire first ignited, it did not look dangerous. I actually saw it, and I'm on a ridge in Big Rock. And I thought, oh, I'm not worried about that. Look, the smoke's going up. There's hardly any wind here, and usually if there's wind, it's windy where I am. And then it just never quite went away and gradually got bigger. I also think that I'm not exactly sure who was responsible for it, but we had a neighbor's son, an adult, and he came and really urgently told us that it was worrisome, and in the afternoon, and suggested, highly recommended that we leave, and was willing to help. So all of those things, I think were very good. And since this seems to be kind of an amalgam discussion, I'll just go ahead with some of my suggestions, which shouldn't take very long.
go ahead.
I would say it's important to understand that the wind can be very different in different areas. And in that regard, we could have more, what do you call them? Weather machines, weather stations that actually NOAA will use, and they are not that expensive. By now they're maybe $1,000, and they're not huge. So I think that would help us understand what was going on with the fires so that people could make, the best decisions. And I have the identification number for that if you wish. I would say the strike must be immediate. I still don't understand why, given 69 Bravo and the importance of the immediate critical importance of immediate response, all available resources were not mobilized before the fire broke out, so that right there, so that they were in the chopper and it was full, like when they saw that fire. To me, I'm not a firefighter, but it seems like that was very, very critical. I think we need, looking at some of the issues in the middle of a fire and some after fire. I really feel that Santa Monica Mountains disasters or whatever better name you could come up with, to coordinate all the services prior to and throughout an event would be very, very helpful. There's so many different voices, even from the same agencies that have been here forever, that they just don't quite get to talk to each other. And it's not any individual that it's a problem with, it's just a structural issue that's been present for decades, since Zev was here. So I would encourage, really good coordination, and simulations. Ignition points, they have to be addressed. Without an ignition point, there is no fire. And we know that electrical fires and telecoms must be undergrounded, and there is a move now to get that done. And yes, with some difficulties, but nonetheless, it's moving in the right overall direction. I would say, looking at the Jesucita fire, mechanical tools cannot be used outside on a red flag day. You can't have metal weed whackers, out there. Then, if they strike a stone, there you could have it. And that just, it can't be. It just can't be. And whoever has to be held responsible, they have to, really be held responsible. I think, and I'm not sure what the evidence is, but I believe that having the canyons closed, for whatever reasons, helped protect us. And I think they should be closed on red flag days. For, obviously not for residents. And somehow, although I don't know how, but I know some people do, we have to work much harder to be vigilant about arson and to understand it better so that we can, as citizens, be a strong force. I would say homes absolutely must be hardened. Some will need financial assistance, and I don't care what it costs, it has to be provided. These things have to be done. You can see so many instances of where trees and shrubs and stuff didn't burn, but the house burned. And so we have to harden our houses, and we need help. They may need design help to figure out what, how to do that within the footprint they have. But we have to do that. There's also a known issue of inadequate space between houses. And I don't know all the data on that at all, but I think that somehow has to be applied. I do know that in Southern California, based on a Keeley and Safard study, 2019, about structure loss, they looked at 40,000 houses in 4 different cities and areas, and LA was one of them. So the most important things here were that eaves must be box. Now, interestingly, boxed eaves are actually better than no eaves. And I'll leave the scientists to describe why, but that's true, and it worked in my house. Triple pane windows with tempered glass with resilient frames and covered vents were found to be the other most important issues in structure preservation in Los Angeles. There's another study by Keeley that shows that watering plants makes them more resilient, and I would suggest watering, periodically. And I don't know what the evidence is, but on red flag days, I always water beforehand. The leaf litter, some of it can be left, but it must be cleaned up according to standards. And I would say Julie Clark from she works for the government now, but has been a volunteer for a long time and is expert in fire for the Santa Monica Mountains. Probably could give a good presentation on that so we understand it better. And the most important area to focus on is the first 70 feet. And I believe that was that other Keeley study that I mentioned before. So, like thinning of shrubs and, and stuff can be a problem if it gets too close to the house. And of course, there's the first 5 foot, information now. I would say also, and I'm close to being done, yes, invasive plants, particularly grasses and black mustard, must be removed from everywhere. Just like in Lahaina, I think they are going to be found to be significant in fire, intensity, and spread. And yes, and we are, we have this invasion of invasives with fountain grass, which is particularly a problem. And the reason is these grasses are more of a problem than native grasses, for example, are that they desiccate more, they desiccate earlier, and they therefore become more flammable. So when native plants, which are resilient, and I can say that in my property, yes, they did really, really, really well. Then if they're gone, invasives invade. That's just the fact. And as I said, invasives, I think, are the highest fire risk. We must have an adequate water supply. We must. But people, you can see their descriptions, they know what the flaws are. The government has told us, reasons why there was not adequate water. That it just one of those things, it can't be like that in the future. And I would say, for my last closing gripe is the FAIR plan. And that has been really a nightmare, a true nightmare. And testing for smoke damage, I would ask the city, the county, list those tests that we need to do. List cleaning instructions where it's safe to clean and what you can clean with what, and what you like electrical stuff. You may not be able to clean it. You might need professional help for that, but some of it can be done. There's just no information out there. And I'm reasonably astute, and I have just had a devil of a time trying to get that information. And I would say, the FAIR plan has really tried to obfuscate the coverage and the information. So I do feel that is a very bad thing from the governmental perspective. So thank you.
The insurance issue, this is a statewide issue. We obviously have very limited influence in that. I personally am empathetic to that because I'm also a California resident facing the same thing in a very different area. But while we're focusing on the city's response to these fires, I think it becomes abundantly clear that there's a number of factors that make this a very complicated issue. And again, I encourage you all to engage in the broader public process to encourage these important changes. Yes, sir.
All right. I've been debating whether or not I want to go where I'm going to go. But this is like a community couch trip, and I figure you guys are like therapists. So I'm going to roll with it. Here we go. So I grew up here too. Megan and I grew up together. Our moms were good friends. Lost our family homes. I've lived through every fire since 1970. I evacuated my first time when I was 5 years old. So I know this landscape far too well. And so I'm going to go quickly through a few points. The brigade, absolutely, more money for the brigades. These are our people. They're not outside firefighters. They're our own friends and residents. There's something amazing when I go down the street and I see people that I know. I see Colin Drummond. I see Chris Frost. I see people from the community who are here, and they're the only ones who were there when the fire was coming close. Fire department wasn't there. Our brigade was. They didn't have the license to do what they needed to do, but they were there. And that is great for us to have. We need more money for that. Yes. I don't know why the city's communications failed. I didn't get any alerts. Most of our neighbors didn't get any. It's usually an amazing communication system. When this fire happened, it failed. It failed for a lot of us. I think we need to find out why that happened. I'm sure it's beyond the city's fault. Something happened somewhere, a transponder, who knows what happened, but something happened. Need to make sure that never happens again.
So you never received anything throughout
Nothing. Not a single alert. Nothing. I think we do need to communicate to the city's staff that circumstances are different when a disaster happens versus when the city is operating at normal. This is where a lot of our issues are coming right now. And I want to focus on that question, how the city can improve future responses. Hopefully we never have another fire. I'm going to get into that too. But when you do, everything needs to change. City staff is having a very hard time right now pivoting from it's our job to enforce the code to this idea of, wait, we have to relax our discretionary approach to the code now. Isn't that a double standard? No, it's not, because everything that enforcement of the code is normally supposed to preserve was destroyed by the fire. Now you have to relax the code to bring back the things that enforcing the code would otherwise protect, which is our community character. The whole goal has to be to look at our mission and vision statements and what comprises our community. And our community is not just mountain and beach, it's people. And Malibu with different people is not Malibu. So we have to bring not just our environment back, we have to bring our people back. That is critical, and staff needs to understand their job is not overseeing buildings. Their job is overseeing the restoration of people. And that, I think, has to be understood. We need to hire a PR firm. I've already started to do some work on that. Rogue, I'm going to talk to the city about that. We need to have PR so that people stop getting this TMZ vision of Malibu. That inhibits our ability to respond to emergencies because people think, oh, look at all those rich people and this and that and the other thing. If you remove the 50 or 60 billionaires that live in Malibu, it's a pretty middle class community. Santa Monica in our school district fight is always trying to portray us as this super rich city. They're the ones with a 90402 zip code that's in the top 10 wealthiest in the country. We're not. 90265 is not in the top wealthiest zip codes in America. Just want everybody to understand that. There's an image of Malibu that needs to be corrected in the press. We need more than just a city communications officer. We need big time PR outreach to make sure that we are controlling the messaging, because if we don't control the messaging, somebody else does, and we are not able to mount a proper response. So messaging and public relations is critical. All right. Now I'm going to go to a movie analogy. I apologize in advance, but it's what I do. In the Jerry Lewis movie, The Disorderly Orderly, he's an orderly who is constantly making horrible mistakes and wrecking everything. But the only person who ever bears the brunt of it is Kathleen Freeman, plays Nurse Higgins. Everything he does, it falls on her. Malibu is Nurse Higgins. If you look at the map, the things that happen to Malibu are not Malibu's fault. They all start outside Malibu city limits with very few different. The Corral fire in 2008, maybe the only recent example I can think of, and that still started on parkland. That didn't start on someone's home. That didn't start on city property. So anything that happens to Malibu, it's always someone else's fault. And so we can take all the mitigation measures that we want to protect ourselves, but we are surrounded by morons and imbeciles and incompetence in this county. The city of Los Angeles is the 8,000-pound gorilla in this county. It's an 8,000-pound gorilla infected with plague, juggling flamethrowers. And when it gets a cold, the rest of the county gets a terminal illness. It's a horrible thing. And at some point, we've got to band with other communities in the county and hold the city of Los Angeles to account, especially in this situation. It's not okay, the wrecking ball that the city of Los Angeles has become on so many levels. And we spend money and resources trying to fix problems that bleed into us from surrounding communities. It's not okay. So to that point, we need to work more with our COG. We need to work with the cities on the other side of the hill. We share the Santa Monica Mountains. When the Santa Monica Mountains catch fire, however, the winds blow it away from their communities and toward us. Agora, Westlake Village, Hidden Hills, Calabasas, they don't bear the brunt of these fires like we do. But we have to work with them to manage these mountains. And to that point, here I go. Big Rock was supposed to have a controlled burn some years ago. That controlled burn was stopped, not because people in Big Rock wanted it stopped, but because Sheila Kuehl, who was an absolutely terrible representative for us, who hated our community, Sheila Kuehl stopped it at the behest of the Las Virgenes Homeowners Federation and the Chaparral Institute, two small groups that subscribe to junk science and are always fighting prescribed burns, goats, all the science that the fire department knows is necessary. Everything that has ever been recommended nationwide. You go to Colorado, you go to Idaho, you go to anywhere that has forests, they understand forestry and brush management. We don't, because we have these crazy junk science groups that have the ear of legislators, and they're bragging now that they got some court ruling against Cal Fire to stop controlled burns. I want those people, I want the city to hold them and the MRCA to account. 2 of our neighbors in Big Rock died. If you stopped our prescribed burn, you have blood on your hands right now. Those groups need to come to account, not go stand up in front of some judge in Northern California and then applaud yourselves. Come to this community, sit on a dais opposite the fire department and scientists. Present your case to people who lost their homes because you told us, oh, we can't allow a prescribed burn in your neighborhood. You need to just harden your house instead. A lot of hardened homes burned because it's science that when you have an excessive density of brush per cubic acre, the BTUs are higher. It travels further. You have certain brush that has to be thinned out, or else there's a 3-mile ember cast. Okay, yeah, we can complain about the grasses. The grasses have like a 500-foot ember cast. When sumac gets to be 8, 9 feet, you go down Canaan, that is murder waiting to happen. There are shrubs there that need to be trimmed back. It's got to happen. It is horribly managed. Malibu needs to be able to go to these entities and put them on the stage and make them account. This is insanity. We don't cause these fires. We suffer because of them. So what can the city do? The city can put its fist in the face of all of these people who are always hurting us. I'm sick of them hurting us. We can't just sit here and go, well, there's nothing we can do. Harden your house, wait for them to, wait for Jerry Lewis to dump paint on your head. No, stop them. Stop them. I'm tired of being the victim. This city takes care of its own really well. For all of our silly little political divisions, you know what? We do a really good job of looking after ourselves. This is an incredibly well-run city, and I applaud these 10,000 people for having the incredible bench that they do, a bench of leadership that always steps up, versus Los Angeles, city of 10 million, that can't seem to put a city council of competent people together for over 50 years. It's unbelievable. So we're not the problem. Other cities are the problem, and other entities are the problem, and they've got to be held to account. Done.
I'm Ani Darmajian. We also lost our home in Big Rock. So I'm sorry if I have to repeat a lot of what has already been said. But we did receive multiple wind alerts in the days leading to January 7th. So we thank City of Malibu for all the alerts. However, we weren't sure how the city was prepared for the winds. On January 7th at 10:30 a.m. when the fire started in Palisades, we were watching from our deck throughout the day. Yes, it was windy at times, but it was a lot lighter throughout the day. No evacuation alerts were ever sent out in Big Rock. Based on past experiences with fires, we had several alerts and we also had our powers turned off. So we believed this time around we were safe. Neighbor in our neighborhood stayed, but also several in the neighborhood just by using the water hose. A 16-year-old boy saved not only his home, but several others in the neighborhood with using a pool pump. Yet, not one fireman came to our neighborhood to save a home without thinking outside the box. They didn't need to have orders. They just needed to come and put out embers even. There was a 90-year-old woman in La Costa as we were fleeing and we were evacuating from Big Rock. I remembered she lived alone. So I went and knocked on her door to let her know fire was coming. She was clueless. She had no idea. So not only I helped her evacuate, but I saved her life because her house did burn down. So communication failed. So when we evacuated, it was around 5 p.m. in Big Rock. Our house was already on flames between 7 and 7:30 p.m. So we consider us one of the lucky ones that we got out with our teenagers and our dogs. So we could all go around and talk about all of our nightmare stories from that day. But moving forward, to see and really feel that the city truly cares for us residents in Malibu, for us fire victims. And the way to show it, what has happened. We can talk about it, what went wrong. But moving forward, I beg the city to make the process smooth for all of us to rebuild our homes. Malibu, I miss it. I'm here every day because this is where I work. I've been here 31 years. Like me, who have kids in school. So, again, ask that you make the rebuilding process stress-free, reasonable, and fast and smooth. And we've already gone through a nightmare. Please don't make the rebuilding process a nightmare. Thank you.
Yeah, and again, to that point, this is not an uncommon horror that occurs following fires, and I can't encourage you more. There's not, I mean, from our part of this, there's not a lot we can do there. So I just encourage you to continue to engage in the public process to try to steer that. Paradise, Reading, this is, Santa Rosa, all face those exact same issues following their fires, and there are solution sets, but it's going to be incumbent upon.
I'm also a council member here, and I'm very aware of everything. But because I was doing dual, I think I was skewed with the alerts because I was getting all these other alerts. But I do know that in Big Rock, a dear friend of mine did not get any alerts. And it was until somebody knocked on her door that she was able to pack up and leave, and they lost their house. I have a lot of, I guess I have a lot of suggestions. Seeing it from all different areas now as a resident, I agree with everything that is said before me, but I would like to develop a stronger connection with community, the residents, when there's red flag, where to go, and then where to get information, how to learn about their zones, because this was really eye-opening for me with zones. It was the first time that I actually knew that I had a zone. So Genesis was very helpful. Watch Duty was helpful. And before TSEP leaves, I'm just going to call them out because they're here from Topanga. I'm also really engaged with let's learn from our neighbors and let's communicate with them. These guys are from Topanga. And so I think that there's a lot for us to kind of make stronger relationships with COG and with Topanga, who is right over there. I'm really passionate about the seniors. I think that we need to strengthen our relationships with something like Betty's Buddies. The seniors always die, not always, but if you look at the statistics, they're the most vulnerable. So I've been working on some sort of occupant support so that, and if you guys actually, because I hear that you know about emergencies, have suggestions, I would be very open to those. I think at these centers, because we go to pavilions generally, we always go to the supermarket. It's like JFK at Easter with all the flights, they're delayed, everybody's plugging in their devices. I actually saw a young woman breastfeeding and pumping milk on a milk crate. So that, shouldn't really happen here in Malibu or any city. I would like to offer residents dry ice. I would like to have those. So what we did was we had the equestrian center become a relief center, which I thought was really nice gesture, but I wasn't sure if residents knew it was there. And so in the future, I'd love to just have like a dedicated space. So this space, depending on the fires, the people would know where to go, whether it's the school, because the schools should have all of these medical supplies anyway. As far as our EOC, I was also really surprised to learn that City Hall mobilizes. We kind of leave our city, and we had really the opportunity to possibly set up at Zuma, which was like the command space. So we had county there, LA County fires, we had so many opportunity to like to be in the city. I just wasn't sure why Malibu City also didn't have like a trailer that was there. That happened at Franklin, and that also obviously happened at Palisades. And they were there daily, around the clock. National Guard was there, and it was just like kind of the obvious place to set up the emergency operating center. Instead, we moved, and this is not a criticism because Lord knows I thought you guys did a fantastic job. And it was my first time. I was sworn in the night of Franklin fire. So, I mean, I had hardly met Susan, and I think that, you know, my hat is off. Woolsey, I would love to see the after action plan to that, which I have, but I wasn't sure what the city actually implemented from it. So it's like kind of a town hall like this or some sort of informational situation where we kind of go, oh, let's look at what we've adopted, how we've improved. So here we are doing this. I would like to know what happens with this. Right. And so I would love neighborhood captains. I think there's a lot of power in neighborhood captains. You knock on the doors. I would love to see, after Woolsey, we kind of looked into sirens. I don't know if they're a good idea. All I know is that there were people that didn't hear they didn't get alerts. So if we're plagued with PSPS, why not invest in sirens? The sirens are a little controversial because, you know, some people say they don't hear them, some people say they do hear them, but I would be very interested in relooking into anything that stacks the cards in our favor because death is, you know, we burn, these mountains are born to burn and they're going to keep burning. Obviously, strengthen our relationship with MRCA. I agree. The county, like, what's the point of paying the firemen if they're not going to fight our fires and then not pay the community brigade who is here to fight the fires? So it's kind of this conundrum. I would love to talk about native plants. We live in a place that we can help, like, you know, treat nature with nature. I would love to see live oaks and, you know, what Georgia said earlier. We have a lot of these solutions at our fingertips, but it takes money and attention and implementation. So some of my feedback there, I can go on and on about fire breaks and prescribed burning, but I'm not going to do that because I think we're doing that. But I do think so. We're going to have PSPSs again. Those are public safety shutoffs for those that don't know. I would love to see a place where community can get together and charge their phones together, something that the city supports. And I really want to thank the staff for all of this that you guys do. The Safety Expo is also really rad. I went last year. In-N-Out Burger was there. I think it's September 6th this year, the same as TSEPs, unfortunately. But I will be there, and I hope to see a lot of new people coming. Because a lot of times it's the same people. But I want to see like new families that come and move to Malibu, and they're like, oh, watch duty, what's that? And a raffle prize, dunk the mayor. Maybe we can do like throw pie at the council lady. And I'm going to get off now because thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think, you know, as a leader, you can see how, you know, this is a complex issue. And while right now we're focusing on the response, there's a lot of integrated pieces that come together. The insurance component, the vegetation management component, the mitigation elements, all this, you know, is a larger puzzle that needs to come together to actually be the overall solution.
Thank you.
It's brief. First of all, anybody that is listening, if you haven't had your home inspected by the city for home hardening, you're hearing all the comments, you got to do that because it might make the difference. These statistics show you can save between 50 and 80% of the homes. Secondly, that hasn't been mentioned that Susan led was revitalizing the CERT team along with Richard Garvey. And the CERT team, after a disaster like this, starts helping everybody with water and everything else. So that's important. But what I wanted to speak of, people have said we got to hold somebody accountable for this, and I totally agree. Well, there is that. There's a number of lawsuits going on. I'm not an attorney. I don't have any, horse in this race. But you've got a deadline of July 6th. You get 6 months from the event to sue LA City and LA County Public Works, and there's a couple others that are involved in this. There's lawsuits going on. You don't have to sue them now. You just have to file an administrative complaint. And if you go on LA Public Works, you can find the link that if you don't file this complaint, you cannot sue. Deadline of July 6th. So that's super important. I was sitting next to Norm. He said, I've never heard about this. Yeah, they're trying to keep it quiet. They don't want you to do this. And this is for people whose homes burned and people whose property was damaged. Okay. Like, I'm not living in my house after 6 months. We're living in Calabasas because the toxic smoke so bad. Go in the house and your eyes water and you get a sore throat and a headache. And why? Because it's got lead that tests for and a lot of people are in that situation. So just have to be aware of that July 6th deadline and file it. Okay. You guys are here because that invited us into this fire community and we became aware. We had a fire meeting up in Rambla after Woolsey, and they came and participated. And it's great. We need to work together because if the wrong wind hits Topanga, there is no access to evacuate. I mean, you think of it, there's a road in and there's a road out, and yeah, there's old Topanga. The fire department now seems to say for people in Topanga, yeah, all those houses up in Fernwood, how that's going to work. It's going to be worse than Paradise. I told Sheila Kuehl that to her face. She turned and walked away. She didn't want to hear it, but she wouldn't let the controlled burn happen. Okay, so back to Malibu. What are we going to do? We've got to get staff to help people to rebuild. It's too difficult. It's not going to happen. People are going to leave this town, and we don't want that. We're trying to hold on to the community that we have. What's going to happen is if staff realizes that people are struggling, they're underinsured, they're overwhelmed. They hear from a few of us who talk all the time, oh yeah, you guys are here, even though your house burned, but they're not hearing from the people that are just giving up because it's too difficult. It's a very hard process to rebuild in this town. And we've got to do everything we can. And that's going to include going to the governor to get a new executive order to clarify and relax some of the rules. And Jackie Irwin, our assemblywoman, has said she'd be glad to go to the governor personally with this. She would like those recommendations to come from council. So that has to happen. And then we can hopefully move forward. Have been occupied. After how many years is that? 2018 and November 9th? We can't have that again, or this community will disappear. Thank you.
Thank you. That like I said, we've seen this throughout California following fires. What you speak of is a real thing to consider.
Graves, and wanted to echo everything that Scott and Wade and Joe said. Agree with that wholeheartedly. My family, we lost our home on Big Rock Beach, longtime residents there since 1973. Won't go into too much detail about it. If you want to read the Malibu Times, Ben Marcus did interview me. You can read about it there. In regards to the city's response to the fire, I don't really have much of an opinion. I think they did a great job. They're still doing a good job. But in regards to rebuilding, which tends to be the sidebar focus of this conversation, I'm working with the Malibu Rebuilds Task Force, and 3 of the members were kind of experts in wildfire design. I personally am, Louis Tenna is, and Abe Roy, one of the contractors is. And on July 10th, we're hosting a free workshop in the Malibu Library from 5 to 7:30 p.m. It'll be basically focused on how do you rebuild, how do you get started rebuilding, what are the fire hardening, fire stopping, and WI guidelines that you should utilize in your rebuild? How would you pick consultants in the right steps so you don't waste money on consultants at the right time of the design process? A lot of the costs associated with rebuilding in Malibu are daunting, and a lot of it has to do with consultant cost overruns. So it's a free workshop. Feel free to attend. It'll be a webinar, so you can also attend on Zoom. But the point is to try and equip everybody with the information that they need so they can move forward in good conscience and comfort in rebuilding as efficiently as possible. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think the only council person that's come to Topanga and visited us at our EOC and spent 2 to 3 hours figuring out how we could work together. I am the president. My name is James Grosso. I'm the president of an organization called TCEP, the Topanga Coalition for Emergency Preparedness. And while I don't live in Malibu, I was here quite a bit with during the Franklin fire. I'm part of the sheriff's search and rescue team, and I'm a call firefighter. TCEP started after the '93 fire because we learned that after a big fire, that we are not a city and we had no one to count on except ourselves. So that's why we formed, and we've been at this for almost 32 years. And so I'm just going to, from my observations, I, like the council member said, am in the position of being on both sides of the line. And so I would just like to quickly give some comments, some observations, and things the city council may want to look into that we witnessed during this fire. And both of the fires, we heard the first page go out. We monitored that fire until long after the knockdown and posted about it continually. And what I will say is the Franklin fire, the fire department was extremely prepared for. They were ahead of the fire. They were down at Pepperdine. They were down on Malibu Road. They're on PCH because in a Santa Ana wind-driven fire, we know where the winds are coming from and we know where the fire is going. And they anticipated it and they were there. And that's why the destruction was not greater than what it was. And in my view, they did an excellent job in that fire. The Palisades fire is a different animal. That fire started in the city. That was a mutual aid fire, and the city responded to it first. LA County came in under mutual aid to assist them with that fire. I can tell you that that fire burned extremely quickly, and the first 8 hours we're discovering that the winds were not nearly as great as everyone anticipated, and said the reason that the fire could not be controlled so quickly was because of the winds. The weather stations and weather data are proving that not necessarily to be true, but in any case, that fire rapidly made its way down to PCH, as it always does. It gets the fresh air from the ocean. Then what does it do then? It starts creeping on either side of the ocean. The winds were driving it north and west, so it was going to creep north and west. I can tell you, we had people down at Topanga Canyon Boulevard and PCH when that fire hit Sunset Mesa, and it jumped Topanga Canyon Boulevard right down by the gas station, which is tucked against the side of the mountain. So it went over the top. It hit the feed bin, caught that on fire, hit the Reel Inn, the restaurant, caught that on fire. And then that fire continued to burn alongside PCH north and west. And it backburned against the winds where no one really thought, and burned all the way up to Topanga Canyon against the winds up to the lumber store. It continued its north and west progress to Tuna Canyon, where it burned even faster. I was up at Parker Mesa Overlook with the sheriff's department watching that fire burn. It burned up even faster up Tuna Canyon all the way up to Stunt Road eventually, and then continued to burn west. And during that entire time, for the first day and a half, almost 2 days, we saw new resources down at Topanga Canyon Boulevard. We would have expected that's a predictable fire. We would have expected strike teams lining Topanga Canyon Boulevard as they did in 93 and a number of other fires, but we did not see any of that. We did not see resources anywhere to be found for 2 days. It wasn't until the third day that we started to see that. Someone mentioned fire breaks, and fire breaks were cut. Quite a few fire breaks were cut through Topanga and the Santa Monica Mountains. The big question now is, are we going to maintain those fire breaks? And fire breaks, there's a lot of controversy of them. Fire breaks do not work so well when the wind is going against the fire break. Yes, the embers get in the air, they burn over the fire breaks, and they reignite. But the fire in Topanga and the fire in Malibu, the Palisades fire, backburned against the winds, except for the winds that pushed it along PCH. But all those canyons that burned, like Las Flores, Tuna, that backburned against prevailing winds. So fire breaks in a situation like that are effective. So for those who always say fire breaks don't work. Another thing I think the city should look into is the water issue. We had some problems, as everyone knows, with water. And I don't think we've got the full story on what really was happening with the water. One of the things we need to make sure of, and we're trying to investigate, that in a red flag situation, the SOPs for the water departments, both District 29 and Las Virgenes, those tanks should be full. At the start of a red flag, all those tanks were full. We were told that they ran out of water because they were drawing water too quickly and they couldn't refill fast enough. It's been my experience in other fires and other red flag situations that that's not necessarily the case, and that if the water is down, everyone thinks those water tanks are there just for a water supply. They create pressure in the system. That's what they're there for. They need that pressure, and when it starts drawing down, they need that pressure to refill it. And we're trying to find the answer to that, but we do know that 69 Bravo was out of water for almost the better part of a day. They had no water filling the tanks up there. And what we've been told after talking to the senior engineer at District 29 was that there were a lot of valves that were still open from the Franklin fire, and they spent almost a day with personnel going out, turning those valves off in order to build pressure back up into the system, and that was valuable firefighting time. So the water issue is something that really needs to be looked into. In addition, so a couple of quick questions, which I don't need the answers for now, but for folks to think about. I know Malibu has an evacuation plan. I was part of the task force after the Woolsey that met here and worked with Acting Captain C2 at the time, which later became Captain C2, on a evacuation plan for Malibu that started at Ventura County and went all the way down to the 405. And I was in here when it got voted on and approved a couple years back, but it was not the same plan that I heard. But in that evacuation plan, there are generators and black boxes and things that need to be at all the intersections, the traffic control areas, in order for that evacuation plan to take place. And I'm wondering, was that evacuation plan called into place in either the Franklin fire or the Palisades fire? I have a copy of that plan somewhere, and I've been looking for it. I've not been able to find it yet. I cannot find that plan online anywhere. Does the city have that plan available online so I could get a copy of it? I'll have to keep looking for my own. And if it wasn't implemented, why not? And thank you.
Southern Cal Edison, because thank God their leadership, and I'm sure it's only because it's been hurting their bottom line so much, has made it a priority to try to get as many all of the service as much as they can underground. And they're taking the cost of it, which 20 years ago, I was at meetings like this where they proposed to do an underground on PCH, but they were going to assess every one of us like $15,000, which, people couldn't afford except the billionaires. So very little of PCH got done because of that. But anyways, they came up and they were explaining everything. And I was asking them, well, what about, which telephone poles is it going to do? And I just wonder if there's a role for the city to play in putting some pressure on these companies, because they're doing it, but Frontier, Cox, these other communication companies are not doing it. And, this is something that's going to come up over and over and over again. And all something has to happen is on one of those poles, and then it falls over, and then, it lets a whole hillside. So, and Southern Cal Edison has offered to all those companies, we'll trench it, we'll bore it. You come along with us. It will cost you a lot less. But no. So I don't know if there's some kind of, role that the city can play in trying to pressure some of these companies to do the right thing and to make our community safer. Because they do always come back. Fire.
Right.
Here.
Right. Thank you.
One is I'm really curious about who in the city is going to take a leadership role in sort of figuring out a plan, a fire plan. I don't know who's in charge of that, but you're getting all this information. And I think that, for example, I want to know who is in charge of running when the fire happened on January 7th. Who was running it? Who is telling the fire department to stand down or where to go or where not to go? We certainly know they were told not to go to Malibu, and they were in the Palisades. And who told them to stand down on PCH and not go up the canyons? And so I feel like the city, there has to be someone in the city who is in charge of figuring out a plan for us and fighting for us and making sure that we get the resources that we need. I mean, for all of us to sit here and, every person who's come up here has said that the fire department was standing by and wasn't doing anything. And then we hear that it was the county fire department who was in charge and that Malibu really didn't have any say. Well, Karen Bass had a say in LA City because she said she didn't need any more resources while our houses are burning because of their incompetence in LA City. So it's like, I feel like Malibu just sits there and is walked all over. And frankly, and I've said this, and if Palisades and Altadena hadn't burned, no one would have given a shit about Malibu. And why I'm saying that is because Malibu, as Wade has said and other people have said, has a reputation of all these wealthy people. Well, the people here, we're not the property managers of these estates. We are the citizens who live here and raise our family here. It's a middle-class neighborhood. Our lives have been upended. Most of us don't have enough money from our insurance to rebuild. And we've been the victims of the incompetence of LA City and others. I mean, Water District 29 hasn't even given their report. And I feel like there's someone in the city of Malibu needs to be in charge of investigating this. The report from Water District 29, the report from the county fire department of what exactly happened, because we haven't heard anything. And I think that's really like a first step in figuring out a solution, notwithstanding the fact that we need more resources. And as I said before, Point McGee is right there. Why aren't there more fire dropping helicopters and planes that are very close for an area? And then also the controlled burns. There are specific things that can be done. We're all told by the insurance companies and the fire department, make sure there's no shrubs around your house. Make sure you harden your house. When we all rebuild, we're going to try to rebuild a fire safe house. That's really great. But guess what? When the fire is coming in at 4,000 degrees, all of these magic fire retardant things aren't going to do a damn. What needs to be done is they need the resources to stop the fire. So let's not fool ourselves. We can do all this great stuff and we're going to spend a fortune rebuilding our houses. But if we don't have the resources to put out the fires, if we don't control the surrounding area, it's going to happen again. So we can sit here all we want, but until there's a solution and a plan, the same thing's going to happen. And so I really think that there needs to be a committee or someone in charge that's going to really push through and talk to people up in Sacramento or whatever, and get the resources that we need because we didn't have them.
I wanted to kind of take a step back and look at what happened just before the Woolsey fire in 2017. Is there was King Gillette Ranch was a location for a community meeting. It was mandated by the Public Utilities Commission to introduce a concept that Edison was proposing was basically a denial of service, to turn off the electricity when the wind blows hard because could start a fire. And of course, everybody mentioned all the things that, oh, well, I mean, the traffic signals aren't going to work and the cell phones aren't going to go and my sewer pump isn't going to work and my electric gate's not going to open and my garage door's not going to open. And by the way, I use the internet for my telephone and that's not going to work. And, these were all identified. And the solutions are kind of obvious. I guess everything has to be on a battery system or a generator. But that's not the real solution. What Edison said was we have this temporary heat. They're like, no, they're bare wire up there. That's why the owls get fried when they try to land up. They hit the ground burning. Sometimes they start a fire. Else, quicker exists in catalogs. You just order it and switch it and change it. And they go, well, how long will that take? Oh, maybe a year, 2 years if we do the insulators. But they also asked for permission to establish their own little weather stations on various poles that they just internalize their own metrics of whether they're when they're going to turn it off. They kind of disassociating from the National Weather Service and other sources for red flag and so forth. The red flag was the trigger. We have red flags all the time. So in a Woolsey fire. So I'm not going to go there, but I want to say what we learned from Woolsey fire. That it takes more than 2 years, 3 years, 5 years for Edison to do behind schedule. Our state agency needs to issue these time demand orders to Edison to comply with this program, and is why they haven't made any more progress than they have. Um, some of the other functions of the city and the county were back in 2014 when we weren't even in this building yet. We were in the other building. And that was individual property special assessments at the request of the property owners. Can basically the county establish a payment schedule for the property? Don't qualify the owner whether they can afford to put a solar system on the roof or harden their home, make it more efficient, or a backup generator, or whatever it takes. That the state revolving fund is a very low interest program where a property can pay back over 20 years the cost of implementing some of these more expensive fixes to save a house. That same funding mechanism may work for rebuilding a house to an extra standard, like a high lead standard was being discussed back then. And that assessment would be unique just to the owned property at low interest. And you don't have to, you could be almost upside down on a property. I mean, they'll give it to you because it goes with the property, it's secured. You can pay it off if you sell, or the new buyer can continue it. That's a source of funds. And the city and the county need to work on this with the state and figure out how we can make money available to homeowners to do what they need to do or what they want to do or willing to do. So I just want to say we need to work on Edison, and the other is the water level management plan for these water tanks. If in 1999, our city manager, we had a water interruption to the city for 3 days, and the water tanks did eventually deplete. But it wasn't necessarily the program of the water district to keep the tanks as full as possible. Hazard zone, whatever they call that. So water in this last one, we seem to be running out of firemen in the Woolsey fire and in this most recent fire. And part of the Big Rock problem was a master phone line, huge cable that was low on the pole, halfway up the pole, drooped across Big Rock Drive, which was their only ingress and egress. And that was later on, that wasn't in the beginning. And systems, we don't have one. System for tsunami warning back when I was on Public Safety Commission with Carol Randall, and we went to a symposium. Dr. Kostas Sinolakis, world renowned from USC on tsunamis. Sure, there's tsunami systems that work, that you can make them loud enough. We could have one here. And we said, well, why don't we have one that also, it'll play a different sound for fire? We'd do two at once. We'd probably get a grant for all of this stuff, just like they have in Hawaii. Theirs works. I know people who live in that town, and they hear it go off every month. Didn't go off because nobody pulled the trigger when they needed it in Lahaina. But you could either put in more sirens, put them closer together, or buy the louder model siren that works in a coastal city. The sound engineering study that was commissioned by this city was, I think, inaccurate, and that needs to be re-explored. And my answer to the study is, so what?
Questions, but you actually addressed those for us as we were talking about alert notification and we were talking about other issues. So thank you for that. What we intend to do is we're taking all this information, we're digging in documents, we're looking at internal city processes, and we'll come up with a report describing what we see, and we'll put together some findings. And based on those findings, we'll put together some recommendations and a suggested improvement plan in terms of, again, focused on the response, on the actions that the city engaged in with regards to the response to the fire. So your comments are 100% very helpful in terms of framing the broader picture of the incident and giving us a very good insight into the challenges that you all face. And my heart is absolutely with you. This is a horrific thing to go through, and obviously we wish you the best, but we hopefully will be a small part of this and making some improvements moving forward. So with that, Susan, did you have anything?
Tried to get this done sooner, but as you know, it's been a little overwhelming. But we finally are getting this rolling. And I just want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for coming out and just speaking and even just telling your stories, because it's good for us to be reminded of the stories of what you went through. We know what we went through, but to hear your side of it is very helpful, and I appreciate that you came out on a weeknight.